Eli had been logging in the forest near his home for several years, and because the Chungbai Mountains are so thick with trees, many people here make a living from logging. Eli supports his family with the money he earns from logging. On this day, Eli took his logging tools and drove to the forest to cut wood as usual. As Eli was concentrating on his work, he suddenly felt a pair of eyes staring at him. He hurriedly stopped and looked up to find the source of the gaze. After an initial look, Eli did not find anything. He shook his head and thought he was hallucinating because he had been under too much stress lately. He picked up his logging tools and was ready to continue working when suddenly the familiar feeling returned. Eli picked up his logging tools and walked gingerly into the bush. After plucking through the bush, Eli became paralyzed with fear. A northeast tiger was lying in the bush watching him. The animal found by Eli did not rage, though. Instead, with great difficulty supporting its own body, it approached Eli. Eli held his breath as the tiger actually stretched out its tongue to lick him. "Oh no, this tiger's gonna eat me!" Eli was already paralyzed with fear and he had no strength to resist. He closed his eyes in despair. The tiger did not open its bloody mouth, though, but instead lay directly next to Eli. The pain that was expected did not come. Eli slowly opened his eyes and directly stared at the tiger's eyes. Eli sucked in a breath of cold air as he found a look of help in the eyes of the tiger. Without waiting for Eli to think about it, the tiger rested one of its paws on his leg. Eli looked down and saw that the tiger's palm was obviously injured and blood was still coming out. As Eli observed, the tiger let out a low roar, seemingly unable to bear the pain. Eli looked at the tiger and its wound, and then understood that the tiger wanted him to help with the injury. But Eli's heart palpitated, and he directly asked the tiger, "Are you asking me to help you with the wound?" The tiger nodded seriously, as if it understood Eli's words. Eli let out a long breath and encouraged himself. He picked up the tiger's paw and looked at it carefully. He found a wooden spike stuck hard into the fleshy pad of the tiger's paw. He took out the tool he had with him to clip out the splinter. After getting out, he made sure there was no residue left in the wound before finally pulling out a small bottle of white wine from his pocket and sprinkling it on the tiger's paw. He could feel the tiger curl up for a moment when the wine was sprinkled on its paw, but it held back. Eli pulled off his shirt and wrapped a cloth around the tiger's paw, finishing off his treatment of the wound. Eli looked at the tiger, and it twitched its ears. Then he stood up, patted the dirt off his body, picked up his objects, hurried back to his car, and drove away as fast as he could. Eli drove home in fear and trepidation. As soon as he entered the house, he grabbed a drinking glass and took 2 big gulps of water before reacting to his encounter with the massive predator. Snowflakes were falling outside the window, and he had some worries about the injured tiger. He didn't know if it could survive the cold weather. The eyes of the tiger came back to his mind. The tiger was not in good shape. It was sickly and injured. It probably couldn't even catch its prey. Thinking about it, Eli had a sudden impulse in his heart. He jerked up and went into the kitchen to cut away half of the meat his wife had just taken out. Hey, Eli, why'd you cut the meat?" "I have a need for it. You and Ming Ming stay at home. I'm going out." Eli returned to the forest, carrying the meat with the memory of the original path back to the place where he met the tiger. As expected, the tiger was no longer in the same place. Now, he was a little happy about this, as it meant the tiger still had the ability to move. It could find its own place to escape the snow, rather than lying here to freeze to death. He was just about to turn and head back home, when he suddenly felt something ghostly pluck the next bush. And indeed, the tiger was there, its gaze once again on Eli. But this time, Eli was much calmer. The tiger looked at him with a puzzled look, as if asking why he was back again. Eli took the meat from his arms and put it in front of the tiger, saying, "I'm worried about you starving to death, so I came back. Eat up. I'm leaving." With that, he turned and headed back home again. Turning his head, Eli heard the sound of the tiger chewing the meat and laughed. But upon coming home, Eli felt desperate because the door was locked and he couldn't enter the house. Eli's heart thumped. "Oh, my wife's angry with me. I was in a hurry to go out and I didn't tell her clearly what was happening. What should I do?" The aroma of food wafted out of the house through the opening of the window. Eli took a deep breath and smiled dumbly at his wife before saying, "Hey, honey, the food smells so good. Let me in." "Oh, now you want to come back? Tell me, what have you been doing out there for so long?" Eli hurriedly explained the story of how he met the injured tiger, bandaged it up, and ran back home, and then ran back to feed it some meat. Eli's wife's face turned from puzzled at first to shocked, and then finally helpless. Eli's wife shook her head helplessly and opened the door for Eli to enter the house. Eli entered and gobbled up the food. Eli did not wash his hands. His wife looked at him. She wanted to reprimand him, but he just escaped from a tiger, so she didn't say anything and instead sat down to eat. His son, though, was excited to ask questions. "Dad, how big's the tiger? Dad, I want to go with you to cut down a tree so I can see the tiger." "No," the husband and wife shouted at Ming Ming in unison. When it comes to safety, the husband and wife were never going to back down. Seeing that his parents had firmly rejected his request, Ming Ming pouted and chewed his food slowly. But in his heart he thought, "You can't stop me if I want to go." The next day, when Ming Ming got up and dressed, Eli was already dressed and ready to go. Almost finished eating, Ming Ming rolled his eyes, hurriedly washed his face, and began to eat. Eli discussed with his wife taking some more meat away. Ming Ming finished eating and ran back to his room to stuff a doll inside the quilt, pretending to be sleeping by himself. While the couple was arguing, he put on his thick military coat and quietly went out the door, where he hid in Eli's logging truck. He knew that his dad had just asked for meat, which must be to feed the tiger. Since his parents did not allow him to go, then he would go quietly. After doing all this, Ming Ming felt that he was the smartest kid ever. "Well, that's all I got, and I don't know if it's enough for that tiger," Eli muttered to himself as he pocketed a small piece of meat and started the car. When the car finally stopped after a ride into the forest, Ming Ming watched his father walk into the brush with his logging tools. After a minute, Ming Ming stood up and jumped out of the car, trying to follow his father's footsteps. But because of his short legs, he could not see his father's figure. The little guy wrapped up his army coat and looked around, hoping to find a little bit of his father's trail. In a short time, he saw his father's footprints, so he followed them all the way. At this time, Eli did not know that his son Ming Ming had followed him to the forest. He was trying to find the tiger and wanted to see the status of its injuries. He hoped this meat would provide enough nourishment for the animal. Eli searched, but he did not find the tiger. Ultimately, he decided he still had to do his work. Eli took out his logging tools and started to pick a tree to sell the wood for a good price. When the logging tools rang, Eli suddenly felt some vibration in the ground, and from the distance came what seemed like the sound of a bear growling. The vibration and sound were getting closer and closer to Eli, and he could even see the running black figure. Eli suddenly felt terror and quickly packed up his tools and was ready to leave the place. When he was packing up his tools, he heard his son Ming Ming's voice. "Dad!" Eli looked towards the voice, and it really was his son. The bear was now getting closer and closer to both Eli and his son. He and Ming Ming could not escape. Eli gritted his teeth and rushed over to hold Ming Ming, but in his rush he slipped and fell. The bear's eyesight was not very good, so Eli hugged Ming Ming and hid behind a tree, hoping it would go somewhere else. Ming Ming, however, asked unknowingly, "Daddy, is that bear trying to play with us?" Eli sucked in a breath of cold air. The black bear heard the sound and began to close in on the tree where they were hiding. Suddenly, a tiger's roar cut through the tense atmosphere, followed by the tiger scurrying out of the bushes and pouncing on the black bear, tumbling and tangling with it. The tiger was wounded, but it was the king of the jungle, and after a few rounds, the black bear was beaten and fled, while the tiger remained, weak and breathing heavily. Eli saw no danger, and he walked out with Ming Ming in his arms, pulling out the meat and placing it in front of the tiger. The tiger looked at the father and son, then lay down and chewed the meat slowly. Ming Ming looked at the tiger, while Eli looked up at the sky and let out a long breath. Oh, we had a true escape from death.